Welcome. This is another Khan Academy support video. Specifically, we're going to be taking a look at the fourth Khan Academy assignment this week called Graphing from Slope-Intercept Form, where our focus is if they give you equations in slope-intercept form, how do we make their graphs? So before we get started on our first question, I'm going to take a look at the whiteboard a little bit larger to review a couple key concepts and also a new idea. Slope-intercept form, as you got from the last lesson, is whenever these linear equations are written in a y equals mx plus b form. The m will always represent your slope when the equation is written in this y equals form, and whatever b is, the number that's all by itself, represents your y-intercept. When I'm asked to graph a linear equation when I'm given slope-intercept form, to me it's a three-step process. The first thing I want to do if I'm asked to make a graph and I'm given a slope-intercept form equation is identify what is my y-intercept and my slope. Second, I'm going to plot a point for the y-intercept, the first point for that graph. And then third, I'm going to go use the slope to take the y-intercept and track another point that will be on the graph. So let's see that in action. Here, our equation, the equation that we're taking a look at, says to graph y equals 4/5 x minus 7. So I see the equation of y equals 4/5 x minus 7. The first thing I'm going to do is identify the y-intercept and the slope. Our y-intercept is right here, this -7 that I'm putting a box around. That's our y-intercept. It's the b. It's all by itself. It's not multiplied with x. So that tells me I've identified my y-intercept. I'm going to go ahead and plot a point for that y-intercept. Remember that the y-intercept, if you're taking a look at this whiteboard, is the value for y when x is 0. Or on a graph, it means on this y-axis, the graph is going to cross or intersect at -7. This is the value 0 for x and -7 for y, where I just put that first green dot that you can see here on the y-axis. Once I've graphed the y-intercept at -7, I also need to go ahead and find my slope. And here I know that slope, if I take a look at the whiteboard, is the coefficient of x, or the m that's multiplied with x. And in our case, our slope here is 4/5. That's the number multiplied with x. And recall, slope is our rate of change, and if you're looking at this whiteboard, what's helpful to think about our rate of change is it represents on a graph our rise over run. The rise shows how much the y changes, that's up and down movement. The run, the sideways movement, shows how much x changes. So in this case, I'm going to go up by 4 units. I'm going to count up by 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and right by 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me recap again. If the slope is 4/5 multiplied with x, that means I will gain 4 y's for every 5 x's, or I need to go up by 4. Let's draw that 1, 2, 3, 4 going up, and then across or over by 5. Oh. So it's a little messy. Let me erase that and redo that one last time. I need to go up by 4 units, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right by 5 units, and now we see this line, this blue line that I've created, started at a -7 for a y-intercept and has a slope of up by 4 over by 5. So we're going to find one or two more and show, but they're very much the same process. Whenever you are given a graph or an equation that's written in slope-intercept form and you're asked to graph it, you need to find the y-intercept and the slope. Second, plot a point for the y-intercept, and third, use the slope to find another point. So here for this equation, our y-intercept is this -7 that I've put a red box around, and that means same y-intercept for this equation. That's a little strange. We're going to start at a -7 for our y-intercept. When you make x 0, the y has to have a value of -7, so that's one of the solutions or a starting point for this graph. The other number we need to be aware of, or the other value, is the slope. That's the number that's multiplied with x, or in this case we see that +2 that I've circled in red there is really our slope. And a +2 slope really means a slope of 2/1. Anytime your slope is a whole number, you can just put it over 1. That means here this graph is going to go up by 2 and right by 1 repeatedly. It's going to keep going up by 2 and right by 1 unit over and over again. You see up 2, right 1, up 2, right 1, and the graph just follows that up by 2, right by 1 pattern forever. Y-intercept, slope of up 2 over 1, and that's how we get to that graph, or this blue line that represents the slope-intercept form equation here. We'll show one more example, but again the key is very straightforward. Find your y-intercept and slope, plot a point for that y-intercept, and then use the slope to plot another point. Here, our y-intercept, our plus b here is the positive 1, so we have a positive y-intercept this time. It's a positive 1, so our graph is going to start on the y-axis with a y value of positive 1 when the x is at 0. We also then need to look to our slope. Here, whatever multiplies with x, that's the coefficient of x, is going to represent our slope, and here it's 6 over 5. That means every 5 x's will get 6 more units for y, or I need to go up by 6 units. That's my y change, so I'm going to go up 1, go up by 6 units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I also need to go right by 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That gets me right there. And again, we can double check and see that this graph is indeed, it starts at 1, it goes up to 7. That's a climb of 6 units as it goes up. And then it also starts at 0 and goes over to the 5. That means up by 6 and right by 5 for that slope that we needed. That's a little messy, but trying to show that slope of up by 6 and over by 5, starting at a y-intercept of 1. I'm not going to show the final one. I think this one's pretty straightforward the rest of the way. If you do need any help, check out their videos, look at their explanations, but also always feel free to send me an email. Thank you for the great work, and I will see you at the next assignment.